Welcome everyone. So today our discussion for today is the journal PRAXIS. It was founded by two Columbia graduates, Amanda Lawrence and Ashley Schaefer. It emerged from the space between practice and theory, and it serves as a platform for the interrelationships between sketching and realization, between the written and the built, or between the theoretical and the material. We would like to welcome Felipe, one of our critics for today, PRAXIS. So Felipe, yeah, hi. So what can you tell us about PRAXIS? How did it, it began specifically by not creating relationships, but offering a space for the relationships to exist within the pages of the journal. So how do you think PRAXIS achieves that? What can you tell us about the strategy?
Well, I think PRAXIS achieves this through two specific frameworks that I think they have come forward with from the beginning. One is like this constant like pairing of an architect's actual documented work, the building and as itself, and what the architect had to do with it, what in a theoretical sense, like his writings, his conceptual approach, and this generates a kind of a feedback between what the building actually is and how the building is actually documented, and if it actually achieves what the architect wanted to do at the same time. So it generates kinds of a constant criticism between the two sides of it. And the other frame is the 5 questions that Amanda and Ashley from the beginning has set up for them to like frame the whole project of PRAXIS as a journal. So I'm going to read these questions that are. So I think like setting this frame that it's clearly what they were interested at the time in documenting architecture has helped them through all these years to maintain a clear editorial approach to what they want to pursue in documenting architecture.
Yeah, looking at the presented questions, so like, I think the first one's the most relevant in the sense that it's relevant to what PRAXIS claims to do. It sheds light on engaging concept things and actual actualization. But then the second question, in which it claims to decommodify an architectural project. So how do you think PRAXIS would actually present an architectural project different than looking through a website or looking through a magazine? How does it really decommodify an architectural project? Isn't that inevitably given with the architect, with the content of the project? Just the sense that it is or the intent of a project is already within the content. So what is the change that PRAXIS in which it presents the project? How does it really decommodify a project?
I think like PRAXIS doesn't take in itself to actually decommodify the project. I think the question is more around how can architecture be conceived from the beginning, about as a commodity or not. But I think they do have to do with the sense that how to document architecture that is not commodified. And in this sense, they have an issue called urban matters that they explain, and they selected a specific amount of projects that, although they're not nor specifically connected or are not approached from the same framework, they all dealing with solution of large-scale problems and large-scale urban problems. So I think this is an example of how PRAXIS deals with like architecture as a means to solve urban situations, or it could be also framed for rural or other types of problematics that architecture deals with.
Right. So you can think of it as in the content, or through volumes. So urban matters as a volume, right?
Yeah.
What else? So through a volume that thematizes the set of a project. don't you think in that all commodities are almost like thematized? So, like all things are under a theme. And I think this is where it becomes a bit problematic in the sense that you present a project under a theme and it could very much possibly be on the expense of what the project really is. So, something being, it could be on the expense of what the project is. So it almost seems like an indifferent approach to the inherent individual innovation within a project. It's almost like looking at something from a specific lens, or does it really allow for a different perspective? So it's addressing as a reader or as a of the journal, or someone who's addressing it, just looking at the way the projects are presented to the public. Do you think that maybe it could be a form of reduction as opposed to presenting a project as what it is, as what is brought by the architect? So this.
Well, I think that by this thematic, what they try to do is not like put it in a group with another architecture and sell it to you like this. I think what they're trying to do is like cross-section a group of architectures that they see that maybe deal with an issue that, although maybe, I would say, the main point in a project, it's coming up with innovative and like interesting ideas about how to solve an issue that also relates to other projects that are doing the same thing, and then these thematical issues are in a constant feedback between what the projects they want to show and what the projects actually do, and how the projects then rebuild a bit how the whole thematic issue is set up. So I think it's like, from an editorial standpoint, it's like a constant dialogue between what they're finding in the projects and what they actually want to show as a theme.
Right, so what do you think of blood pavilion being within the context of landscape? And it's a really reinterpretation, but it could be, can this is the point of it being a major technological innovation. This is what blood pavilion is about specifically, right? About being, so almost like there's a resulting gap between editorial interpretation and actual building. And I actually see it as, because also raised question 4 when they said what characteristics are shared by various architectures of the Americas, whether it is context specific or not, but that there is an attempt to almost find characteristics, so almost ways in which to identify buildings. And I think this could be as opposed to almost like finding a building that is, that is in itself. The building in itself is actually expressive as opposed to looking for identifications to bring them together under a theme, and it just seems. This is.
Well, I think like addressing to the Blood Pavilion, like I think it's not that they are taking the pavilion out of context. I think like it came in a time when landscapes was a big word in architecture, and a word that was being thrown around a lot, and then they find how this pavilion may be considered as a technological landscape, and so it's almost like the pavilion itself really interpret the whole way they were dealing with that landscape, and it's no longer like the typical landscape design in architecture, but also how can a pavilion with all these technological tools brought forward could also be considered as a landscape. So I think it's a constant play between, that's the perfect example of the constant play between both of them, and they're not, I don't think they are purposely misinterpreting the building, they are just deciding to highlight one of the characteristics of it in order to embrace it through the thematic issue they're coming forward.
Yeah, sure. So that brings us to what architecture practices are overlooked or underrepresented by the mainstream architectural press. We have a critic, Andres. Address that question. So please may help us out. So Praxis assumes the role of representing the underrepresented or overlooked architectural practices. So what are those underrepresented architectural practices that really Praxis is trying to address? So, what is this underrepresented?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that Praxis is trying to spot a light on the underrepresented practices. What I think Praxis is actually doing is taking this overly represented architectural capital A's and applying different lenses and finding new concepts behind those buildings. For example, you mentioned the blurred pavilion and how the blurred pavilion was analyzed through the lens of the landscape issue of Praxis, and from that different ideas came through more than just the technology that we were like all talking about this building. So I think that's what Praxis is actually doing with these issues. It's taking these overlooked buildings and trying to find different aspects of them that were not necessarily evident to everybody from the beginning.
Right. And yeah. So like it represents different perspectives or different lenses to the project in a way. I think there's also a couple of architectural practices that also could be addressed, such as different techniques. It could be possible that Praxis could, could communicate through different projects, different techniques. So this brings us to so Praxis documents both built and unbuilt projects. How would the general bridge theory and practice for the absence of the actual building, a building that exemplifies the reality of the construct? You think perhaps in discussing an unbuilt project we are reduced to theory, but then again, is it a reinterpretation of what practice really is? Given the idea of what practice is. So it's unbuilt. We have, nothing material of the building. So how is it that we are bridging practice and theory in the absence of?
Okay, well, I think when that part of the frame they put themselves to came to play, like in the beginning of Praxis, they were actually referring to buildings that maybe haven't dealt with construction and project management and budget stages, but they were actually designed to be built. It wasn't like another way of practicing architecture. It was very specific designs that were there to be built. But I think that now that has changed, and a lot of new things have come into play in what architecture is no longer just building as a field. And there are a lot of younger architects that are practicing new things, and I think that Praxis, in a sense, have identified this and have felt that they are no longer the best medium to document this new change. So it's very interesting that their last issue that's coming out later this year is going to be about bad architecture, and I think they just use this title as kind of in an ironical sense, because I think what they're trying to show is all these architectures that are now appearing that are not dealing with the actual building, but are dealing with more artistical representation or intervention of spaces or installations, ephemeral installations that are dealt by this much younger generation of architects that now have a different view of architectural practice is, and maybe that's no longer just building what architecture is. So I think this generational sense, this generational change that it's happening in architecture, like they felt it too, and maybe this ending Praxis here is also like taking into account that the whole world is now changing in a more globalized sense, and it's very difficult to, like, Praxis was a journal that addressed very well these sets of interests that they had, and like architecture has now changed, and they kind of feel no longer they are the journal for it. So I think bad architecture as a finishing issue is their way of saying, like, this is what we're dealing with now, and like, this is how we can do it, but maybe it's up to the next generation to see.
Yeah, the bad architecture, the volume, it includes a lot of small-scale installations, interventions, but it's almost like practice and theory but it also does, I think it presents like an idea. What you're saying is that practice is now on a small scale, which is a movement that's been, a lot of people that is reduced to small scale as opposed to large scale, maybe.
I don't think it's a scale issue, it's not a built or unbuilt issue.
Yeah, but bad architecture is all built, technically.
No, I think that what they mean with bad architecture, that's what they say is that architecture doesn't have to be built anymore. Like a film can be architecture, and if you take examples like Liam Young, like what they're referring that architects no longer have to build a canonical building in order to be practicing architecture, and that the scope is much larger.
Yeah, so, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think this will wrap up. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.